Hi, welcome back, everybody. In this episode, we're going to talk about the AMX 13 I've been working on. Now, this is the Takom model, not the Tamiya one, but the Takom one. This is specifically I think it's the first one they released, which is the AMX 13/75, and the 75 denotes the 75 millimeter gun. Interesting fact: this is actually a copy of the Panther gun that was used by the French after the war when they designed this vehicle. It has a crew of 3, and it has an auto-loading feature in the turret. It has an oscillating turret, which means that there's only it turns and there's very slight elevation, and this mechanism is covered by this tarp here that's molded on. The Israelis use this. This is an Israeli version. They used this in the 6-Day War in '67, and I believe that they weren't terribly happy with the performance of the vehicle, basically due to the fact that it was lightly armored. And I think what they did is they ended up selling all of the vehicles after the war because they weren't overly happy with them. But it's a neat-looking subject, and it's my first foray into doing Israeli armor. And Israeli armor has always fascinated me to a degree because there's a lot of interesting pieces and whatnot, and it's one of the few hot spots in the world where they do see action, so you do get to see them weathered up and beaten up and whatnot. So it's an interesting subject for me. And what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to focus on the hull, and I'll just pull off the turret here. So the turret has been, so firstly I painted it with, I went back and I used my new favorite paints, which are the Mission Model paints. And they have 2 IDF colors. One is a sand gray version 1, which is a little bit darker. And they have a sand gray version 2, which is a little bit lighter. So what I did is I used this as the base coat, and I primed the whole vehicle using Mr. Surfacer, and I used a mixture of their black and mahogany Mr. Surfacers. Mahogany is kind of like a mid-level brown. I didn't want to paint the whole thing black because I didn't want to alter or negatively alter the tones of the sand grays that were going to go on. So I went with kind of a darker brown, and I think that worked out pretty well. And I think that's a mix that I would be using on future vehicles. Certainly, vehicles that have a tan base color to them. So I primed the whole thing in the Mr. Surfacer mix, and then I used the sand gray version 1 as the first coat. I used the sand gray version 2 as the second modulating color, and then I added a little bit of white to the sand gray version 2 as the highlight color. And again, just with an airbrush and just spraying on. You can see here some of the panels, and maybe in later shots Rob can get in and get a closer look at it. But just worked on highlighting some of the access panels and the top of the hatches here and the top of the gun and whatnot, just to give it that little bit of variance and modulation. And then I went over it with filters. Now I didn't put a filter on the entire vehicle. What it is, I just selected certain panels and hatches and whatnot, and did different types of filters, all in kind of the tan brown range, just to alter the base tone a bit, because having a single color on your vehicle can be a little bit challenging in terms of making it interesting. So I find, not only with the modulation, but I think the filters, and again, this goes back to the work that we did on the Sherman in the first series of videos. I think that's a really good way of adding some variance to the initial color without it making it look like a patchwork, right? So once that went on, then we started doing some washes, and that's what we're going to kind of catch up on here today. So the turret here is basically, up to the point where it has washes on it. We're going to do the same thing here on the hull. We'll do that up close, and then the other thing too is I'll talk a little bit about, we're going to put some pigments on here. We're not going to do a lot of streaking because, again, when you're building a vehicle, you need to give some thought as to where it's served, the type of climate it's served in, and whatnot. And again, these were in the Golan Heights, and there's not a lot of moisture in the Golan Heights, so there certainly would be limited to no streaking on these things. Maybe the odd oil mark or grease mark or spill here and there, but we're not gonna streak this the way we put streaks on the Sherman and the Brumbar. So they'll be very minimal. And I think the next step in the weathering will be primarily putting on a mixture of these two sand versions here, just to, again, because of the environment they served in. It would be quite dusty and whatnot, so there'll be a fair amount of dust and whatnot in here. And we're also going to do some chipping, maybe a little bit of rusting here and there. But we're not going to go too crazy on the weathering, at least from my standpoint, from what I usually like to do in my vehicle. So the Takom kit, nice, yeah, no trouble-free build, no issues. Didn't do a whole lot to it in terms of adding. Maybe I did add some weld beads to the side of the turret here. They're on the vehicle, or they're already on the model, but just to enhance them a little bit. And I did add some straps to the back here, just to add some variation. And I'm also I'm going to be putting some things in this little stowage bin back here, and probably on the front of the vehicle too. I haven't quite figured out what yet. Maybe a couple of, this had a 30 cal gun on the top here, maybe some 30 cal ammo cans, or a box or a rucksack or something. So I'm just trying to figure out how to add some interest to this area here, because they would have loaded, again, like all vehicles. This becomes a home for the crew, and they'll store all kinds of stuff on it that they can get away with. So, what else do I want to talk about? Oh, the other thing that has to be done on the turret here is, you can see this canvas cover here that covers the oscillating mechanism. The reason why they put that on there is they didn't want sand getting there and kind of jamming everything up. So I painted that with a slightly different color of the sand gray. So I used MIG's cyanide gray, which this comes from their Israeli paint kit, and I just brushed that on. It's a little bit glossy, but we'll cut that back with some matte, and I'm just figuring out how to add some texture to it, and I'll probably be using oil paints for that. So that'll be the subject of another upcoming video in the not too distant future, once I figure out what we're going to do there. The other thing that's fair to mention too is there's another ad I did is I did build this stowage bin up with some plastic struts. And the only reason why I did that is because to get this is an Israeli water can. To get that to fit in there, I had to kind of stretch things out a bit, and ended up breaking the kit turret basket. So I rebuilt it with some plastic struts. I'm going to be using this is a World War II German jerry can. But I did some research, and what I found was that the Israelis actually used similar jerry cans, and I think they were actually made by the same supplier that made the ones for Germany during the war, which is ironic. And this comes from the AFV jerry can kit, and they're probably some of the best jerry cans that you can find in plastic. And I actually think they're better than the resin ones, because you don't have, because of the handles here are a separate piece. And you can, with the resin ones that all come in one, there's a lot of flash and whatnot in there that you have to get rid of. So I found these to be actually superior to any of the resin ones I had. And this would just kind of slot into here. So I primed it in aluminum. I'm going to hairspray it and then paint it in the same, or maybe a slightly different tone of the sand gray, and then hairspray chip it, and then add that as a feature, and that will go in this other turret basket, or the other half of that turret basket there, like that. And then another thing I did is I didn't like the machine gun that came with the kit. So what I did is I kind of cannibalized one. So this is the body of a 30 cal machine gun from a Tamiya kit. I can't remember if I took it from the M51 or from the Turan 5 that I have, or Turan 5 rather. And then I used an RB 30 cal barrel on it. So that will fit right into this mechanism here. And then I've got an ammunition holder off of the side of that I'll add to that, so that'll be a little bit some more detailing that was done, and that's about it really. Very nice kit out of the box. I don't know how it compares to the Tamiya one. I haven't had a good look at the Tamiya one, or I don't have the Tamiya one. Certainly haven't built it, but pretty nice. The decals here are out of the box. They do provide decals for these tactical markings here. But I decided to go ahead and mask these and paint them. And boy, oh boy, was that ever a challenge. And I'll tell you why. Because this is another thing too is this is a metal barrel. So I used the Def Models metal barrel, and I think that was made for the old Heller kit. So I had to modify the turret here to accept it. But it's a metal barrel, and it has a resin muzzle brake at the front. And when I was masking these stripes, when I was pulling the masking tape off, I pulled all the paint off with it too. And that was a frustrating experience, let me tell you. And I did that twice. And then I went to our local IPMS meeting here in Toronto, and I was talking with John Mahar, and he suggested, I think it was John Mahar, that he suggested that what I do is I spray Future on the metal barrel and use that as a primer. And he said, and the reason why you use that is because Future is so sticky that it'll adhere much better, and it'll resist tape in terms of peeling off the paint. So I tried that, and sure enough, it worked. So there's a tip. I think what I'll do is I'll use Future to coat all of my metal parts that I'm going to be masking, or there's any risk of me pulling paint off. I think I'll be doing that in the future. So that's one for the books. But other than that, a very, very enjoyable build. So I think what we'll do is we'll do some washes. I'll also show you how to do the tools to get the grain effect on the wood here for the wooden tools. And we'll do some washes. And again, this is one of my favorite parts of the build, because I find when you add washes to the vehicle, that really things really start to pop, and it really starts to develop a life. So yeah, so what I'll do is I'll start mixing it up. I'll talk about the colors that I'm using, and we'll start getting the product on the model right away. Okay, so for the wash, I decided to make a mix of my own. Now, again, with the washes, AK and MIG ammo, and they all have different washes for different types of vehicles. Like we have like desert vehicles and Africa Corps vehicles and whatnot. And you could certainly do that, but I found it just easier to make my own. So what I did is I did a mix between the AK track wash that I have, which is kind of like a dark brown, and I use the MIG oil brusher Starship Filth. This is a great color. This is like a gray, sludgy color, which is good. So it's kind of like a gray-brown mix, which I think goes nice with the sand gray. And it kind of fits in. It's not too stark, as you can see here on the turret. I think it's just the right tone. And yeah, just use odorless thinners to get it to a consistency that will allow it to flow well into the crevices and around the bolt detail and whatnot. So what I'm going to do here is just kind of, you got to keep mixing it, because the color, the pigments tend to settle in the odorless thinner. And so I started doing this area here. So this, again, this is a good, look at all these lovely bolts here. They're just crying out to be highlighted. Look at that, it's just easy. Again, this is my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts of doing a model. This is where you really start to see things come to life. And again, you're not too concerned about putting on too much or too little. Like this one here has a bit much around it, but you can come back in with a brush moistened with odorless thinners and pull that stuff off, or pull the excess off. Not a problem. So I'll just go around. What I like to do is kind of work one area at a time. So I'll kind of work this rear. So again, this is I guess this is some kind of crowbar or whatnot. So I've painted that in a dark gray, and that would have been a natural metal. So I'll go over it with some either gunmetal pigment or some graphite or something to bring that out. I'll do that at a later time. So again, you can see in here on this, I don't know if this is a fuel, or that's probably a fuel thing there, or it's this type of access hatch here. I'm just trying to get the detail in there. So I'm putting a lot more color on it than you'd have to. But again, I'll come once it's dried, air dried, I'll come back with a moist brush and get rid of the excess. Let's go to this side here. Let's start doing the. Now you could. Some people like to put. So I'm just putting thinner on here just to get it wet to allow the capillary action to work a little bit better. I don't know, 6 of one, half dozen of another. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But you can really start to see the definition come out. Now their muffler is in here, so what we're going to do is we're going to apply the same treatment to this muffler that we did to the Brumbar muffler. So we'll do that in a subsequent episode. Let's go back and finish all the bolt detail here. So for these little straps here, I used I use foil. I use foil strips, and I actually got these. These are pre-cut flat wire that I got from UMM. I think I got these at they were at the AMP show. But these are very handy for doing straps. You can use them for ties on landing gear for on airplanes and whatnot. Very versatile. Or you can just simply cut your own from foil, which you can do that as well. So just something to add some detail here because there's not much going on back here except for the axe. So, and again, we'll maybe throw in another water can, maybe a track. The tracks for this. The kit comes with individual track links, but I decided to go with Fruel tracks for this. So that'll be another episode that we'll do. We'll show how to burnish the Fruel tracks. And again, there won't be a lot of weathering on them because this was a dry, dusty climate that this thing operated in. I'll start doing it up here a little bit. And again, you're just kind of going around, just picking out detail here. Look at this little covered louver here. So look at that detail just pop out. That's why I love doing the washes. I'm just going around, just kind of touching the bolt detail, and just letting Capillary actually do its work. Again, if you get too much in there, not a worry, because you're going to come back at it with a moist brush to get rid of the excess. So we'll go on to the other side here, do this, and then we'll start cleaning things up a bit. There we go. That looks pretty good, I think. Right, get some in there, just emphasize that. Now this vehicle will be a bit of a challenge for me from a weathering standpoint because, as you may be aware, I love to throw a lot of pigment and mud and stuff on vehicles, but again, you got to take into account the theater that this thing operated in. And they just didn't get that dirty. If you look at reference pictures and whatnot, you'll see a lot of dust and whatnot, but there's almost no mud because there was very little moisture in the environment. So now what we're going to do is, again, just moisten the brush. Maybe I'll use a smaller brush here. And just get, just unload the thinner from it. Let's go back here. So you can see I did some washes in here, so I'm just going to go in there and just clean with a stippling motion. And the stippling motion kind of helps push the color that's kind of in the middle of these two ridges here. It kind of pushes it to the edges of the ridges, if you will. So it just kind of cleans things up. And the nice thing about that is that it's pushing that darker color to the edges, so it adds to the definition. Let's clean the brush and reload. Let's kind of clean that up a bit. And again, for here, there's going to be another layer of dust and pigments on there. So if it's not perfect, don't worry about it, because we'll come back at it with some pigments. It looks a little bit better. I know I've said it time and time again, but I can't say it enough. I really do like the Mission Models paints. I just find that, you see how I'm just cleaning up around there just by stippling it. Again, stippling is the key. Just to clean up. I'll do a little bit in here. We're just using this, just kind of pushing stuff. There you go. Now you can see there's more color here. This was kind of a messy application of the wash, so I'll just clean that up. Very easy. Done. Back down here. And you can see there's a bit of a tide mark here where I put the wash in, so we'll just clean that up. Now I haven't coated this with anything. So this is right on the paint. And again, this speaks to the durability. Again, another reason why I love the Mission Model paints, it speaks to the durability of them. But you got to use that polyurethane additive, because that's what gives it its durability. So I'm of the mind where you try and put as the least amount of product or coats of things on a model as possible. So the only places I did put something were where I added the decals. So here I went with my Model Master Acryl Gloss, applied the decal on it, put another layer of gloss over top of it, and then put a layer of matte on top of that. And I think I used the Vallejo matte for that. But just to, actually no, sorry, I didn't use the Vallejo matte. I used the Tamiya. I used the semi-gloss and the semi-gloss and the matte, and I mixed them 50-50 to give it kind of an eggshell. And again, to try and keep it consistent with the finish of the Mission Model paints. Because if you remember, with the polyurethane additive, one of the nice features is you get a nice eggshell finish with the Mission Model paint. So I wanted to preserve that. And again, all in the spirit of trying to not have to coat the whole model to make it look uniform, right? And these lights here I did using the MIG Ammo Crystal Red, which is kind of like it's a high gloss clear red, if you will. And they're great for doing. They have like blue, they have green, they have Periscope green. They have all kinds of colors for doing colored glass on armored vehicles. So I mean, you could probably use the Tamiya clear as well and add a drop of gloss to it too, just to give it that high luster. But yeah, it's all about convenience. I'll go and clear here. So the nice thing about here, you can see I'm almost like creating a clean spot on this hatch or this axis. And because the groove is, or the the panel line, if you will, here is fairly shallow. It's hard to get color to stick in there. So this is a good way of trying to preserve that just by stippling around it. And again, you could probably, we'll probably come at this later in the weathering stage with maybe some oil and grease stains on here. Clean up around that bolt. So the stippling does a couple of things. It helps, it gets rid of some of that, removes the color where you don't want it, and kind of helps blend everything in. Oh, while I'm doing this, you may have noticed I'm wearing a polo shirt, and on the polo shirt there's a flak panzer for a whirlwind. Rob's getting a shot of it here. So I picked this shirt up at the local amp show, the Great White North amp show that we had here, and locally there's a group that is restoring the flak panzer up at the Borden Museum, the Borden Army Base just north of Toronto. And they're restoring it to running condition. And if you're on Facebook, and if you do a search on flak panzer restoration, you'll see their page, and they post all kinds of in-progress pictures of the restoration. So you get some really good detailed shots of the Whirlwind, and in particular the Panzer IV chassis. And I don't know if it's an H or a G or a J, but they're doing some great work, and I was more than happy to buy a polo shirt and support the cause. So if you're interested, I fully encourage you to go onto Facebook and look at Flak Panzer, or just do a search on Flak Panzer restoration project, and check on what the guys. They're always posting new stuff and videos and whatnot. They also have a Hetzer, and it's a real Hetzer, not after, I guess the Czechs made a bunch after the war. This is an authentic one that was made during the war for the Germans, so they have some material on that as well. I'm just trying to clean that up just to give it a bit of definition there in the panel, which is, because of the shallowness of it, is a bit difficult, but it looks pretty good. So that's why you only work on small sections at a time, is so that, because if you let this dry too much, it's probably not, or it won't come off. And then you're into repainting and retouching up, which you don't want to do. This is the same process I did on the turret. I find these types of ridges here, these embossed ridges, or reverse embossed ridges, I guess, are always a little bit difficult, because they're, you want to try and get some color close to them, but So that's why it's important to work on just small sections at a time. And if you get tired and whatnot, you can take a break, and then you're not worried about letting product sit on your model drying while you're watching a World Cup game or doing whatever. I think it's kind of funny that after the 6-day war, the Israelis were so put off by the performance of these vehicles that they sold them all off to, I think it was this, can't remember if it was the Philippines or Singapore or something of that nature, but they are neat looking. They are neat looking vehicles. Let's go here and so here, just cleaning off the raised parts here, and just leaving the color in the recesses there, and it just really makes that pop, which is what you want. It's summertime here in Toronto, and it's the last week or so. It's been incredibly hot. Well, hot for us, where the temperature is pushing in the mid-40s with the humidex. It's Celsius, that is. Like for our American friends in Fahrenheit, that would be probably close to 100, which is very hot for us. And I don't know about you guys, but this time of year, I find it can be a bit of a challenge to get some time at the bench because, well, I guess with summer here, because of the climate that we have and whatnot, you want to try and take advantage of the nice weather when it happens. So there can be a lot of other things that compete for your time, like, barbecues, social events, and whatnot. But I was happy to, let me tell you, the last few days I was pretty happy to stay inside in the air conditioning, working on some projects, this and the TKS, and also building the new Meng Panther D for, we talked about that Kursk theme in one of the previous videos there. I'm building the Meng Panther D for that specifically. My friend Sandy's working on a T70, the old Mini Art T70, so there'll be a number of us that will have some entries for that theme, which will be kind of fun. I'm really looking forward to that show. I'm glad Frank and Steve and the guys are putting that back on. That's great. We needed something in our calendar here to fill in for the Ajax show that hasn't been happening for the last couple of years. So I'm really glad they're doing that. So you're just, again, the whole purpose of this is just to kind of clean up, because in some parts we were a little bit sloppy where we applied the wash. The whole purpose of this is just really to remove it from where you don't want it, or almost gently glide it to where you do want it, or guide it rather. In some cases, when you're pushing stuff around, it can almost act like another filter, which is nice. So it just goes to show you can use out of the bottle products, and again, to me, these are things it's a matter of convenience, and there's a lot to be said for convenience. But if you don't have a certain color or whatnot, but you've got, either you can mix different colors, different wash colors, or you can use oil paints. Yeah, I use the oil brusher here, but you could easily use, the same color comes in a tube, like similar to what we have here. You can mix your colors, put a little bit of thinner in there, and away you go. So you have all kinds of options. But using the stuff out of the bottle, there is a lot to be said for the convenience of doing that. So again, you want to make sure that you're happy with this when you leave it, because if you let everything dry, it ain't coming off. And at that point, if you're not happy with it, then you're spraying paint again. Which is, again, not the end of the world if you have to. But if you can avoid it, why not avoid it? And the nice thing about doing armor models is that from this standpoint, it's pretty forgiving. So if you come back to it and you see, I don't like, there was a bit of a smudge or a tide or a tide mark that I missed. There's all kinds of options. You can paint over it. You can put you can put pigments on it. You can put mud on it. You don't have that necessarily with aircraft. Not that I want to give aircraft modelers a bigger head than they already have, but there is some truth to that. I'm talking to you, Jerry. But it is a different aircraft, and I'd like to do an aircraft model in one of these videos once we get through the next few armor projects. Because I think if you bounce around from subject to subject, it makes you a better modeler, because you're going to learn things doing an aircraft that you would never touch, or you would never run into or think of doing when you're doing an armor model. And even going up and down scales, I think, like I did that 72nd scale Turan 1 at IBG Kit, and that was a lot of fun to do. So I recommend. And I was one of those guys that saw 72nd. Why would you waste time with that scale? It's a little boy scale, but no, it teaches you skills, and it teaches you to really kind of focus in. And so I'm definitely going to be doing some more 72nd scale projects in my future. Cars too. I've never been a car guy, but one of these days I'd like to do a car. I've got one or two in my stash. It just makes you better. And sometimes you can, like, I don't know, again, like I can fall into a rut on things, so I can get bored of things fairly easily. So sometimes changing up a subject, or science fiction too. Science fiction, you can, like, I'm a big Star Wars fan, and with the new Bandai kits, they're just little gems of kits, and you can apply, a lot of the same techniques that you do to armor modeling. It's kind of a good mix between aircraft and armor, because they can get so beaten up, or they appear on films as beaten up. So. I think so rinse and repeat this for the rest of it. So I won't waste a lot of time on camera showing that. I'll do that off camera and then kind of update it the next episode. And I think what we'll do now is we'll look at doing some wood grain on this sledgehammer here and the axe in the back. Okay, so for doing tools, what I like to do is I like to take a little bit of brown paint, and I'm using this this wash brown from Abteilung 502. You can see how old this tube is. I've had this for years. Just goes to show you how long these things will last you. And I just put a little bit out on the palette. I take a brush that's slightly moistened with odorless thinner. I get some color on there. And I just touch, what I do is I just go to the edges, and I just kind of put a little bit of color there, and I'll put a little bit of color here. So just right up at the edge where they're clamped, like so. And what it is, I painted this in Vallejo acrylics. I think I used New Wood or Old Wood or the Panzeraces colors. Those are kind of my go-to wood colors, New Wood and Old Wood. New Wood has a kind of bright tan, and the Old Wood has a gray tint to it, I guess, to show the aging of the wood. So they're a great little color. I mean, you can use other colors too. But anything that's similar. So I just go and put a little bit of more paint there. Let's get it all over. And if you get somewhere you don't want it, again, don't worry about it, because it's... And then I take a clean brush, moisten with a little bit of thinner, and then you just kind of drag you do the same thing from the other side. You kind of drag it till it meets in the middle. And voila, that's it. There's not much more to it than that. I might put a little bit more color. Just kind of here at the top. Maybe put some in the middle. And all you're doing is you're using that dark color just to simulate the wood grain. So you just kind of drag it like that. And that's it. It's as simple as that. And just make sure you're even. Now this is because this sits a little bit raised, so it sits up higher than the panel that it's on. So you got to make sure you get underneath it as well, to a degree. And we'll flip. Sorry, Robert, I keep moving on. I just want to make sure I got some good light here. That's it. That looks pretty good. So again, we got a little bit of oil paint where we don't want it. So you simply, again, the same thing as with the washes. That's kind of a common theme here. The nice thing about oil paint, it takes forever to dry. So you can work it off. And all you're doing is just cleaning it up where you don't want it. Easy. I got a little bit here on the same type of thing. I mean, if you wanted to, you could probably slide a piece of paper or something underneath to protect it, but I'm too lazy for that. There. So nice, very convincing wood grain finish, I think. Just very simple. You know where I picked this up? I picked this up from one of those old Marcus Nichols videos that he did. So this certainly isn't something that I was smart enough to come up with. And again, you got a little bit here on the end, so don't forget that. Just add a little bit of color around. I guess the store's opening up upstairs. You can hear Mo moving around, barking. So again, got a little bit of oil paint where I don't want it. And the same type of thing, you just take it off. Easy. Now we'll come back at this with a wash. We'll let this dry. Give it, and you need maybe a 24 hours to let this set up fully. But it is oil paint. So now we'll do the same thing on the axe in the back. That'll be a little bit trickier to get at because of the straps and whatnot, but not an insurmountable problem. So the same type of thing here. Now this should be a little bit easier because there's more points to get the You can see I'm not being terribly precise with the application of the paint. That's okay. You got everything there. And then the same thing. So you want your brush almost dry. And it will focus on this. And you just pull it out, as it were. It's going to drag the color out. Do the same thing here. Same thing here. No, I'm not the best at doing this, to be honest. Some guys are able to get some really nice wood grain. But it's a good, easy way just to give some depth to your wood handles. And you can see how the tone of the axe has changed, right? The handle, like it's a lot more depth to it now just by doing this easy. It looks pretty good. Up here. I'll just clean up the head a little bit here. There you have it. So again, we kind of got some on the straps and whatnot. Same process. Just take a slightly moistened brush, and you can just work all that off. Easy. It looks pretty good. Yeah, so there you have it. So a very easy method. I'll apply some graphite powder to the to the metal parts, and again I painted those in kind of like a dark gray, a Vallejo dark gray or black gray, I think. We'll do that, and then I'll carry on with the rest. I'll do that off camera. You guys don't want to see me do the whole thing, but I'll get this to a point where the wash has been applied. And then in the next session, we'll look at doing some pigments. Maybe I'll paint some of the details here. Like for example, I've got to paint the track. I'll probably do that in a dark gray or dark metallic gray, and then put maybe some rust and some sand and whatnot on there. Again, maybe there wouldn't have been a lot of rust because not a lot of moisture in the theater. I've got to paint this spare road wheel here. Maybe finish painting the lights on this thing, figure out what we're going to do for some additional stowage items on the vehicle to add some interest to it, and then we'll start throwing some pigments on here, and maybe doing some chipping, maybe do some oil and grease stains and whatnot. Always got to throw at least one on a model, I think. And then the road wheels, and then we'll do the tracks, the full tracks. We'll do some. I'm going to do that in some burnishing fluid. We'll show you how that works. I'll do one off camera and then show you what I did with the other side. and I think we'll be good to go. So, one thing before I forget, Dave reminded me off camera here. So, again, just to clarify, when I was having the problems with the metal barrel and taping it and masking it and everything was coming off, and I applied the Future, what I did is when you pull it all off, again, because the paint sits a little bit proud of the metal barrel, you can't just paint over it because you're going to have a gap there and you're going to see it. You're going to see that dip there where you have the new paint. So what I had to do is I sanded everything back. Not the whole thing, but just the area, just to try and blend it in so that it was a gradual taper down to the metal barrel and then a taper back up to the paint. And once I got that smooth, and you just use your finger to see if it, if you can tell there's edges or whatnot. So once I got that smooth, then I applied the Future. So the Future goes right on top of the metal. So before I was priming it with Mr. Surfacer and that was pulling off. I didn't do that the second time or the third time around, I guess, when John talked to me about the Future. So I just applied it right on the barrel, and that worked. Let that sit for. I think I ended up letting it sit for a week because I went away on vacation for a week. So I did it just before I left. Let it sit and cure for a full week. I don't think you have to. Just a couple of days would probably be fine. And then repainted it with emission model paints, and then put the tape on, sprayed the white, pulled the tape off very carefully. What I do with the tape too is I'll put it on the back of my hand just to remove some of the tackiness. I used a combination of Tamiya tape and I think it's called Jimmy tape. I just got again thin. It's thin, like 1 millimeter bands of tape. Put that on, sprayed the white, and then pulled it off right away. Just let the white dry for a few minutes so that it's not wet, and then right away pulled it off very slowly, very carefully. And that did the trick, thankfully, because if that would have happened the third time, I don't know that we'd be here today with this model. I think it would have either gone in the bin or against the wall at that point. So, but yeah, that worked out. A great tip, and we'll certainly use it on parts, metal parts going forward, especially barrels, and especially if you're not masking anything. So if you're not putting anything sticky and pulling it off, probably you're fine. I mean, it would never have been an issue with the Mr. Surfacer. I did even rough up the barrel. It's a good idea to just to give it some fine or sand it a little bit with some fine sandpaper, just to give it a bit of something for the primer and the paint to adhere to. But even with that, it was still coming off. So so I think that or that Future, and I didn't thin it with anything. I just sprayed it right out of the airbrush. Let it dry, and it was good to go. So great tip. Thanks to John for that one. So again, next time we'll do this. This will all be washed. We'll have the tools finished, and we'll probably look at maybe either I'll probably just paint these off camera, and then we'll start throwing some pigments and then some other weathering. So there's probably maybe another couple of 3 sessions on this vehicle, and we'll be done including the tracks. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time. Take care.